No, I don't mind calling them out, but Captain Traoré and Burkina Faso,
Because the Americans, US and its NATO allies and Israel, they are doing whatever they can to reverse it.
So the US strikes inside Nigeria. A Nigerian plane was recently grounded inside of Burkina Faso. And there's some things going on in that region. And if you're someone who's even slightly paying attention to that part of the world, the logical next question becomes, or it has become, are they going to attempt to get rid of Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso? I have an answer to that question, but it may not be the one that you're thinking. Here's why you need to pay attention to this, especially if you're a black person. And if you're a black person in the United States, there are a few crucial reasons why you need to pay attention to this, and I'll get to that later. But if you're any person who considers themselves a global citizen, someone that has humanity in their heart, there are numerous reasons you should pay attention to this and care as well. What is happening in that side of the world needs to be explained, patterns exposed, dots connected, so that we can all make sense of it and then respond. So let's get educated first. I'm going to share some clips with you. I'm going to offer some commentary throughout. And then I'm going to wrap it all up at the end and conclude with what this actually means.
The only hope for the black man in America in a strong Africa and the necessity of the Afro-American becoming inseparably linked with the overall program that's existing on the African continent. The two problems must be solved together, and the two forces must go forward together. This is our only hope. Our hope is in a strong Africa. When we get a strong Africa, the person of African origin or African ancestry will be respected any place on this earth, even in America. But he will not be respected in America until Africa is strong.
So a question for you if you're a black person in the United States. Call this a Afrofuturistic, geopolitical futuristic question. What if there were an actual Wakanda? You, as a black person in the diaspora, would you want to be connected, rooted, or otherwise associated with that Wakanda? What would that mean for you if that actually existed?
The one region of the world where the population continues to grow rapidly is Africa. Africa's population grew 5 times from 1950 till today. It's 1.5 billion. According to the medium forecast of the UN, Africa's population will reach 2.5 billion at mid-century and about 3.7 billion in 2100. And in percentage terms, this means Africa's population was 9% of the world population in 1950. Today, it's 19%. 1 out of every 5 people on the planet is African. And by 2050, it will be about 25% of the world population. And by 2100, 35% of the world population. So Africa will be in the center of the world story, the world history, the world population, the world demographics in the course of this century. Now, what does all of this mean for Africa? That is, for me, the bottom line and the most important point. So my view is Africa's next. You're the next region of 1.5 billion people. But it takes some change of perspective and some new strategy. The change of perspective, first of all, is that this has to happen at a continent-wide scale. Africa was left after the imperialist age with 54 countries and a 55th one in dispute. The transformation that I'm talking about cannot happen 54 separate times. It should be an Africa-wide success because scale matters in economics. China and India were able to grow so fast because of a large economy and a large market that supported a lot of innovation and supported a single strategy that was coherent to build out a power system, to build out a fast rail system, to build out a highway system, to build out a 5G digital system. And that, I think, is the key first step to being able to replicate this rapid catching up plus leapfrogging process.
And the reality is, it's not a fantasy. Everybody knows that Africa is the most mineral rich, and in fact, the richest continent on the face of the earth. And its population is mostly young. It has tremendous prospects for upward mobility, growth, and economic development, if it can take control of its resources and eliminate the exploitation that is ongoing throughout the continent. What would that mean for you? And Brother Malcolm is giving you the answer. It means you, even if you are not in the continent, would be in a far greater position as part of the Black diaspora anywhere that you exist in the world. You reconnect with your roots, and whether you're home or abroad, your position in the world is strengthened. You're not subject to power, you become the brokers of it. Now, the reasons for that seem obvious, but there can certainly be a entirely separate video that explains why that is. But if you trust the instruction that Malcolm X is leaving behind for you, it's simply to say, when Africa takes its rightful place on the global stage, you too are elevated in that position, anywhere that you are, on the continent or anywhere throughout the diaspora.
In order to do that, first, think like a union. For great universities like Wits, partner with universities across the continent to help engender this kind of Africa-wide ambition and strategy and know-how to get this done. And for President Ramaphosa and for his colleagues, champion union, true African union, true Pan-Africanism to be able to accomplish this. This, I think, is what the great opportunity is. I think that this is what we really mean by the change of the world order. I believe that by 2050, Africa will be a high-income region. It will be a successful and growing region. It will be a region of peace, and it will be looked to throughout the world for partnership and for innovative solutions.
Now let's uncover some patterns. And by the way, they always tell you it's only a mystery if you haven't been paying attention. And if you haven't, it's okay. Everyone has their own journey, but now that you are, you're going to find out that it ain't hard to tell in my Nas voice. This here is Captain Crunch Langley testifying early this year at, I think it was April 2025 at a U.S. Senate Armed Service Committee hearing. And let's take a look.
I watched Maghreb closely. Russia now does have initiatives because that is NATO's southern flank, from Morocco to Algeria and even Tunisia and Libya. I engage with them closely for shared objectives of denying the militarization of NATO's southern flank. Absolutely, Chairman. I see this, and I don't mind calling them out, but Captain Traoré and Burkina Faso, as they know that both, whether it's their gold reserves, that is all those proceeds are just in exchange to protect the junta regime, and there are nefarious actors in the CCP and sometimes Russia are complicit in those activities.
So here, General Langley's telling you this is NATO's southern flank. And by the way, tell me anywhere that exists in the United States where there's another country or alliance that has a flank somewhere in the United States, somewhere across the, let's just say from California to Texas, all the way down through Florida. That's some other country's flank, a flank with military bases all across it. And again, the theater he's talking about is US AFRICOM. This is their website, africom.mil. US Africa Command. They're saying, again, tell me what other actor, what other state has, what other alliance has a U.S., some other alliance command? across the country. We don't want red states, blue states, but let's go south. Let's go southwest, California. That's all some other alliances, U.S. command. This is normal. This is normal. If any country or alliance attempted to do that, how do you think the United States would respond? And we read the description on their website. U.S. AFRICOM, with partners and allies, counters malign actors and transnational threats, responds to crises, strengthens Africa's security forces, and supports U.S. government efforts in Africa to advance U.S. national interest and promote regional security, stability, and prosperity. Now, to the extent you believe this last part, right, promote regional security, stability, and prosperity, I mean, one way to look at this, if you look at all of these quote-unquote peace deals that spring up, you can think of the Rwanda and Congo peace deal that they strung together. Often what happens in these peace deals is there's an element of security, there's an element of stability, and certainly an element of prosperity, but all of that is centered around the exploitation of resources, the extraction, how to stabilize and increase the efficiency of exploitation in that region. And so, yeah, we got a set of perimeters, we got to secure land around where these corporations or this exploitation is taking place. It never centers the people. This regional security, stability, and prosperity, that never centers around the people. It centers around the corporations, the exploitation of resources that are taking place in that region, and it seeks to stabilize that. And right, you can't have too much fighting around that stuff. You can't get too out of control because now you're getting in the way. So let's stabilize that so that we can continue to do business as usual. And in some cases, actually increase the extraction that is taking place. But it never centers the people. It never does. So again, they are saying U.S. Africa Command. I mean, it's so bizarre when you hear it, and it should be bizarre when you hear it. But what happens is we get desensitized. This stuff is so normalized that when you hear it, it doesn't register. It doesn't offend you. It doesn't alert you. And that's part of what manufacturing consent does, right? And let's go up to this, say, okay, what do we do? Let's go up to their website. What do we do? Let's go to that. Look, they have airstrikes, a whole section on airstrikes. Boy, they got archives. 2016, 2017, 18. Let's see 2025. What do we got here? Wow, look at that. All of these airstrikes. Look at this. This is normal. This is normal. So again, just imagine this was the volume of airstrikes taking place inside the United States being carried out by some other foreign actor. This is normal, but it should not be normal. There's no shame in this. And again, these are all press releases. Click on these links, read more about it. And of course, they're going to be laced in their rhetoric and their narrative, but this is normal. This is normal. It should not be normal. They've always been pretty plain spoken about it. U.S. Africa Command. Got a nice little acronym and everything going on, AFRICOM. Okay, so they're saying the things out loud. I just have to just make sure that you don't miss the obvious. And by the way, the utility of his testimony is a classic example of a tool they use to gain buy-in for the BS that they have up their sleeve. And this reliable tool or strategy is called manufacturing consent. So what is manufacturing consent? I know a lot of you do know what this term is, but this is education. So we have to assume that people are picking up things for the first time. And so we'll take some time to explain that. But manufacturing consent means powerful groups, governments, corporations shape public opinion to gain acceptance for their policies, making it seem like a natural consensus through media control, framing, and subtle manipulation, rather than overt force. It's a propaganda model where media filters information to support elite interest, ensuring the public agrees with the powerful by limiting alternative views and creating a narrow range of acceptable thought. It means that decisions and choices being made aren't organic. They are artificially building the consent, constructing the narrative, and ultimately crafting your choices. The effect of this removes your choice. It creates self-censorship unless you oppose it. You see, once the consent is manufactured, you have some options. You can say, yeah, that sounds good. Let's go with that. Or say nothing, which is also giving your consent because saying nothing is not opposition. It's not opposing it. That is what we call going along with it. Your silence makes way for it. The way you disrupt someone else's manufactured consent is to dissent, actually oppose it. That means actually standing for something, expressing that dissent. However you decide to do that, with your voice, your dollar, your vote, your labor, it's all part of it. Self-censorship or secretly opposing something is not dissent. Keeping your objections to something concealed serves zero purpose. It might provide you an understanding of your own position, but it does nothing to disrupt what is being manufactured in place of your objection. And what is happening in this testimony is a classic example of manufacturing consent. And because it's a pattern, it's predictable. And the pattern here is to associate a country, an organization, a leader with a foe. And Russia and China are the go-to villains here. They're weaponized to strike fear in you, stifle any critical examination into the matter, blind you, gain your unthoughtful, uncritical, unquestioned loyalty to whatever plans that they already have baked, all socially and politically engineered to remove your choice in the matter. Tying anything to Russia is a pattern. It is a pattern. They did this to Patrice Lumumba. They said he was a Russian agent working with the Russians, and they took him out and he was assassinated. And this is to make no judgment of Russia in either way. What I am providing you is a position, one in that Mandela taught us, in that we cannot assume that any enemy of the United States must then also be our enemy.
Welcome to America, Mr. Mandela. I'm Ken Edelman. Those of us who share your struggle for human rights and against apartheid have been somewhat disappointed by the models of human rights that you have held up since being released in jail. You've met over the last 6 months 3 times with Yasser Arafat, who you have praised. You have told Gaddafi that you share the view on, and applaud him on his record of human rights and his drive for freedom and peace around the world. And you have praised Fidel Castro as a leader of human rights and said that Cuba was one of the countries that's head and shoulders above all other countries in human rights, despite the fact that documents at the United Nations and elsewhere show that Cuba is one of the worst. I was just wondering, are these your models of leaders of human rights? And if so, would you want a Gaddafi or an Arafat or a Castro to be a future president of South Africa?
One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think that their enemies should be our enemies. That we can and we will never do. We have our own struggle, which we are conducting. We are grateful to the world for supporting our struggle. But nevertheless, we are an independent organization with its own policy. And the attitude of every country towards, our attitude towards any country is determined by the attitude of that country to our struggle. Our attitude is based solely on the fact that they fully support the anti-apartheid struggle. They do not support it only in rhetoric. They are placing resources at our disposal for us to win the struggle. That is the position.
It makes no judgment about what Russia's intents are or what their ambitions are or whether they're a good-natured state or good actor. None of that. Is to assume that we have the sovereignty to make our own decisions about who we partner with in this world. And America has no more say-so in who Africa partners with than Africa has any say-so in who the United States partners with. And we have a cast of characters that we partner with, by the way. But tying someone to Russia is an easy wink and a nod for them. It lays the ground for you to then fill in all the blanks with all the horrific narratives that they want you to fill in with. So when the plan is finally revealed, because it's always existed, and is executed, you won't challenge it. And you won't think critically about it. So one example doesn't expose a pattern. We have to show you more. So let's watch this clip from Antony Blinken.
Now, according to the outlet's website, African Stream is, and I quote, a pan-African digital media organization based exclusively on social media platforms, focusing on giving a voice to all Africans both at home and abroad. In reality, the only voice it gives is to Kremlin propagandists.
Good old Antony Blinken, remember him? Serving, by the way, in a Democratic administration. And I'll never fail to point out their complicity in the condition of people all across the globe. And there he is, manufacturing consent to take down young African journalists, particularly because of the traction that they were gaining, and telling the truth about what is happening in an African context. And overnight, gone. They was off every social media platform that they had built a following on, just like that. I think they're back on YouTube. I think last I checked, and they're having to start over from scratch. But by the way, it doesn't have to be true. You don't have to have any evidence. You just say it. Let's listen to the brethren from Africa Stream.
The latter accusation that we're Kremlin propagandists is insulting, not really so much to us, but to African people. The idea that if you're against imperialism, it's not because you've analyzed the conditions that you're in, not because you understand the relationship of neocolonialism within the African context, that our economies are not owned by us, that 14 African countries use the CFA franc, which keeps its reserves in the Bank of France, which controls the economy of those countries. And the other countries in the African continent are basically hostage to the US dollar. They have to export things just so they can receive US dollars. And if they don't, their currency is devalued and their whole economy collapses. So if you analyze these situations and you think, well, there's something wrong with this. We're meant to have got our independence in 1958, 1957, 1960, 1961, and so on. But yet our country's economies are not controlled by us. The people that win elections are the people that's campaigns are best funded, that have connections to Western capital. If you analyze these conditions and you say there's something wrong with this, then it's not because you're intelligent enough to understand what's going on within your own context. It's because you're influenced by Russians. And this is something, a trick that has been played time and time again within our continent. They called Patrice Lumumba, they called him the African Castro. They said Thomas Sankara was a Russian agent. They said Nkrumah was a Russian agent before they deposed him. The list goes on and on and on. Now, in the contemporary sense, they say it about Julius Malema, they say it about Ibrahim Traoré, they say it about Assimi Goïta. If you're the president of Niger and you say, it's not right that we export uranium, but most of our country is in darkness. If you say that, that's not your own analysis, that's Russian propaganda. So we're not insulted because, you know, we're in very rich company, but it is insulting to African people. And as an African, I'm insulted, not so much as African Stream.
Now, let's come back to NATO, military bases, and all the rest by listening to an elder here, and then I'll provide some commentary on the other side.
How is it possible that the U.S. can have a military base in Ghana and a portion of the airport is under the control of the U.S.? How? 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 Ghana? Ghana? No. These, you have to be asking questions and demanding answers. That is your responsibility. Otherwise, we'll still continue to be in this mess. Continue to be in this mess.
The U.S. has roughly 750 military bases throughout the globe. So for those of you who say, I cannot worry about what's happening over there, I have to worry about what's happening right here, just know that your country's over there, your taxpayer dollars are over there, kitchen table politics is semantically engineered language weaponized to keep you from paying attention to what your country is doing everywhere throughout the world that impacts you. A fuss about the cost of bread while we take your taxpayer dollars and fund universal health care for other countries and fund genocides. The elder here is frustrated. He is frustrated and heartbroken and implores us to ask questions or continue to be in this mess. Now here, in this next clip, he is asked about the Alliance of the Sahel States, the AES. And in his response, he's saying that the other African countries need to grow in the same direction. And he is specifically calling on young people in Africa to demand it. So here in this clip, he is being asked specifically, what do you think about the AES? That is Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, for those who don't know. And let's take a listen to part of his answer. Here we go.
In order for them to succeed, we have to make sure that there's a regime change that will complement what they are doing. Otherwise, theirs is in danger. That is the ethos of Nkrumah saying that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it's linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it is our responsibility to ensure that Ghanaians know what is happening there and they demand a change to complement what is there. If they are doing it, we can do it. And I fully support what they are doing. But I'm also aware that it's against tremendous odds because the Americans, US and its NATO allies and Israel, they are doing whatever they can to reverse it. They are doing whatever they can to undermine it. And they will use our own people to undermine it. They will do that. And we say that, Abo Abekao Efruntuum, the insect that will bite or sting you come from your own clothes. So they are doing very well, and we need to know what they are doing and organize solidarity supports, organize demonstrations at the French and the American embassies, tell them hands off Niger, hands off Mali, hands off Burkina Faso. Let them manage their own affairs. Hands off them.
There you see Izzy's all up in there, folks, connecting dots. Now, they're always up in there. They're getting kicked off African observatory committees, put back on, suspended, etc. Why they're even allowed on one is beyond me. But we have to connect these dots. It's part of it. It's patterns and dots. All right, so now that we know a little bit more, let's bring this back to the question of the strikes that took place in Nigeria. The basic question that people are asking is really, is this a step towards attacking Burkina Faso or removing Ibrahim Traoré? Now, given what you know, the question, not that it doesn't make sense, it just appears to be an odd question. You see, this region of the world is U.S. theater, military theater. This is where the U.S. operates militaristically. So it's not even a question of whether they're going to meddle or use their power and influence. They already are. They have been. You see, flanks aren't set up as borders around a regional position so that you can surprise someone with a picnic party. It is a strategic and tactical military position. By the way, quick side rant, but it's contextual here. This whole Russia-Ukraine thing, this is NATO aggression, expanding its territories along the borders of Russia. This would be akin to China setting up military bases in Mexico along the southern California and Texas border. How do you think the U.S. would respond to that? Again, I'm making no character judgments about Russia. I'm just complicating things a bit for you so that you have a better understanding of geopolitics, because it's important. All right, so we got a map here. Now let's familiarize ourselves with some commonly used terms when discussing this part of the world. It's going to help orient you and enable greater focus in discussions involving this region. So let's zoom in to this area here. So he's talking about the southern flank, and we have to first point out what are considered the NATO member states here. So Portugal, Spain, we got France here. This is part of France here. We got Italy. This is all Italy here. We got Greece. We got Albania. We got Croatia. Let's go all the way here to Turkey, right? This is all NATO member states. Now, the next region to get familiar with is often referred to as MENA. That's Middle East, Northern Africa. So let's get a different color going here, and let's start clicking on these. This is Western Sahara, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt. I'm going to come over here. I got Israel, Palestine, all right? I got Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran over here, Yemen, right? So this is the MENA region. But you'll notice he didn't say MENA. He said the Maghreb. And so for that, we have to take everything out here and just focused on Western Africa. And here you'd have to add Mauritania here as well. Now, interestingly enough, what is left here, right along the southern border, is what is referred to as the Sahel region, right? And the alliance of the Sahel states includes Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. And look at that positioning. Look at that positioning. He says they're paying a lot of attention to this area. Now, not for nothing, up here, let's zoom in over here. And right here is the Strait of Gibraltar. And on the European side, you have Gibraltar, and on the African side, you have Morocco. And this connects the Atlantic with the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the Maghreb region controls strategic maritime routes. Specifically in Morocco, Morocco has the Tanger Med port. It has the highest container volume of any African port throughout the continent, connecting global trade across Asia, Europe, and the Americas, plural. This is the theater in which U.S. and NATO allies operate with clear militaristic and imperialistic objectives. And capitalism is all up in there. But we should honor the spirit of that question, especially for those that are curious, who just want to know, is this a step? The attack in Nigeria, is that a step towards replacing the leader of Burkina Faso? If that were to happen, we should see that through the broader terrain of a geopolitical theater in that region and understand the geopolitical, the military, the imperial context of that region, and only through that lens, rather than something occurring as a new campaign. So the strike, it took place, it happened, not to minimize that, but it's a detail in the broader context of what already is in place, not something that is new or outside of that context. You know, it's been said that there have been numerous assassination attempts on Ibrahim Traoré. And, I don't have enough details around that to go into that or tell you anything factually about it. But let's just say that's what the streets told me, right? And I'll leave it to those that can speak with more authority as to the details around that. But I'll just say, it fits the pattern. Fits the pattern. Here's the broader thing that I want everyone to understand. You know, growing up in the U.S., I would imagine it's the same in the U.K. and other places. In the U.S., we learned about the original colonies. We learned about the gold rush, right? These were all things in the past, by the way. So these are things in history books. But, the gold rush never left Africa. The rush for all that Africa has to offer never left Africa. In fact, it intensified. Africa, in many ways, is still colonized. A lot of Africa is still colonized. Many of them are just recently experiencing their independence in our lifetime. And colonialism isn't a light switch. Its tentacles are not unraveled overnight. It's in fact, in many ways, they're still tethered to the education systems, to the currency, the language, right? And it takes on new form, new shape and form. And we call that neo-colonialism now. And it's all throughout Africa. The strike in Nigeria is not the beginning of something new afoot. It is the continuation of U.S. imperialism in the region, along with its NATO allies. And unfortunately, they will get the help from U.S.-installed African puppets all along the way. This is the legacy of colonialism. Unless we respond collectively, along with the African youth, then we will continue to be in this mess. And you should care because your humanity calls you to care, first and foremost. You should care because your taxpayer dollars sustains this. Think about how hard you work. Some of us, many of us, far too many, are struggling just to survive in this capitalistic system. Some are doing better than others. And some of you are having a grand old time. But we're not talking about individual excellence. We're not talking about Black excellence. We're interested in community excellence. And at the end of that fiscal year, when you have to pay your taxpayer dollars, that $2,000, that $5,000, that take whatever it is, $10,000, $20,000, depending on how much money, all that money, that hard-earned money, a lot of it is going to fund this violence and sustain it. You should care because your own advancement is bound up in the struggle of people everywhere. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. These aren't cute slogans or bumper stickers. These are declarations that are instructive. They are part of the blueprints left behind for you to take seriously. They are understandings that come from deep critical examination of our current condition. There are so many of these lessons left behind, and they've been lost, diluted, sanitized. But these blueprints were laid, and far too many of us won't even unroll them to be reminded of the brilliant architecture of liberation that they left behind. You know, coming out of slavery, advancing civil rights were immeasurable human achievements in history like no other. And they were made possible because of the brilliance of our ancestors. They needed to be brilliant, and the culture demanded their brilliance. But at some point, too many of us stopped learning. And lessons not passed down or lessons lost. But it's not too late. We have the responsibility to do a better job exercising our capacity to uncover patterns, and where the pattern isn't known or understood, then use our capacity to connect dots so that the picture becomes clear. And our inability or unwillingness to exercise this capacity means that we will continue to be outmaneuvered every time. And so now we'll end with a question for you. Given what you know, and hopefully you'll go out and learn more, what is your response? I love the question because it forces you to examine your own human spirit. And you can do this in the secrecy and privacy of you shut the bedroom door, shut off the lights, do what you, and ask yourself the question. You don't even have to answer it out loud. Just in your mind, ask yourself the question and get still. And what is your response? And you decide what that is for you. You decide what that is. And it's not going to be the same for everyone. But what I hope is that you aren't unresponsive. Don't be an android. Be a human that has a beating heart and a soul. And figure out, what is my response to this, however little. Is there something that I'm going to do differently? Is there any way that I'm going to show up differently in this world? Is there any decision that I'm going to make differently? What is my response? But don't be unresponsive. And that's it. So I'll leave links in the description to the full videos. I've shared a number of clips throughout this video. And shout out to all those folks that are out there spreading the word, spreading the knowledge. I'll keep saying it. Good voices got to get louder. We got to increase the volume. We have to increase awareness. And as we say, each one teach one. So that's it. Respect.
Tell them hands off Niger, hands off Mali, hands off Burkina Faso. Let them manage their own affairs. Hands off them.